Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee. It's a beautiful Tuesday after St. Patrick's Day, March 22nd. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Here. Mr. Germana. Here. Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Conwell. Here. There is a quorum.
Mr. Harrison's on his way. Approval of minutes from February 16th. They're in your package. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Matters referred to committee are none. We will take C and D together, and the individual that was to discuss C is unavailable to be here, but we'll move forward with any discussion regarding D, T. Morales. Is that okay, T? Thank you, sir. You're very accommodating. What we wanted to do today is kind of go over what we've been working on the past years and what we will be working on and what we're in the process of working on. So summer coming up with the convention, I suspect we won't have much time. So we will start, Sheriff or Mr. Director Bova, I want to start with the county fairgrounds.
I just want to do a brief introduction and let you know how, if you're comfortable, we'll set it up. Chair at the council. The safety team's all here. You can see them all here behind me. Sheriff Pinckney will start out. He'll update on the county fairgrounds, the AED defibrillators, the Euclid jail and the CPR classes. He'll be followed by George Taylor and Brandy Carney, connection with CCOMS and 911 consolidation. Then we'll finish with Dr. Gilson, you, Shannon, and the rest of the participants for the heroin and fentanyl epidemic update.
Okay,
If you're good with that, then I'll have Sheriff Pinckney come up,
that's fine.
I think.
Sheriff, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I heard you got your CCW.
Saturday.
Oh, all right.
I went shooting yesterday.
Oh,
Dirty Harry is safe.
Dirty Harry, say? All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of council. Give you a real brief update on the information you requested. In regards to the county fairgrounds, I had Sergeant Kaminsky meet up with the APL, and they did take 2 horses, I believe, out of the county fairgrounds, and he's working with APL to pursue charges on the individuals out there at the county fairgrounds.
That was after the initial death of the first horse.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. So Sergeant Kaminsky is working with APL on that. In regards to the AEDs, there are AEDs in every county building. We have 3 in the Justice Center, 1 at Lakeside, 1 at Juvenile Justice Center, and you'd be happy to know that there are 5 in this building. So, and they're all annually checked on in regarding maintenance and battery operation and stuff like that. So,
Right, and a further discussion that we will have at a later date is the concern that I have is who's qualified to use those? Do you have to get qualified / certified? Who we can get certified? And in a broader look at things, and I know that over 700 employees have been trained in CPR, but we're looking to make that more available to more employees. And that discussion was actually started from Judge Gallagher over at the Court of Appeals, who's on a committee for the courthouse, safety in the courthouse. I asked them to be here, but they're on a conference today. So again, a broader discussion down the line. I think it's important, not only that we have those, and we do have those, but I'd be hard pressed to pick an employee out that could actually go and get one.
correct.
And so I think it's important that not only do we have them, we identify where they're at, make sure the employees know where they're at, and afford employees the opportunity at CPR classes in an expanded manner. And I know legal's here and had some concerns through HR as to being mandatory. This is just discussionary purposes. We're not making anything mandatory, but I would like to look at what the city of Cleveland has, which makes it, I believe, mandatory that all incoming employees are trained, regardless of status. So I think that's an important thing. Again, down the road, I'd like to broaden that discussion and incorporate it with certification on those shock paddles for people with heart attacks. yeah, I don't know what your opinion is.
No, I agree. I agree with that. And we do have EMTs that do the training for us that I'd be willing to let those guys and girls come out and train and do whatever they need to do to train people up on the use of the AEDs. So,
Yeah, that would, and I do know there's a certification that you can get. We do have somebody that teaches that. Again, he could not be here due to the family emergency. But in regard to this, does anyone have any questions for the sheriff as far as a potential moving forward with CPR classes and certification?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Germana?
I'm just wondering, Sheriff, do you know, is there codes as to how many AEDs or who's required? What kind of businesses or establishments have to have it, AEDs?
I don't know if there's any codes. I can research that, but what we've done, we've put them in all of the county buildings. More is maybe 2 or 3 in different buildings, depending on the size of the building. But I don't know of any specific code that says a bank, for instance, you're required to have this. Unless you know the code.
Sheriff, I've asked Mr. Morales to come up, because that was one of my questions as to how many do we need? And is there anything anywhere stating, you know, should they be per floor or every other floor? The Justice Center has,
There are 3 in the Justice Center that I found.
and that to me doesn't sound like a lot, but then again, I think access is the question.
Correct.
As opposed, how fast can we get to them? And that's really our concern. Mr. Morales, do you?
Councilman, to answer your question, Alan Berman, our health and safety coordinator, who could not be with us today, does have that information for you. If we could table the item and the questioning for when he is here to be able to appropriately answer. We do have AEDs at all our facilities, including the jails. The ones in the jails are monitored and used by Metro Health. We currently have 4 facilities that do not have AEDs. We are in contact with those agencies so that we can provide training and get AEDs into those locations as well. Once again, it is an important initiative for us to have AEDs. These save lives, and we want to move forward with it.
Just as a aside, just to hear a good story, a few years back, right at a polling station in Parma, they happened to have one just outside the hall, and someone hopped to and got it, saved someone's life that was voting, that collapsed right while she was voting, and she's living today, so.
We just had a story recently, I believe it was yesterday, where this young teenage boy, I believe it was in, was it Summit County? The same thing, he was a track athlete, collapsed, and the athletic director went and got it and put the paddles on and saved that young man's life, so.
Mr. Greenspan.
Great, thank you. Just to the chair, are you saying that it's your desire to have all new employees trained in AED and CPR?
Again, on advice of counsel, there are some, to make it mandatory could be problematic.
Okay.
So I think if we can afford the training to those that are willing, I guess that's the route we're gonna have to go. I'd hate to have to force a certain segment and not the other segment, but I think going forward as a new employee, I don't think anybody can say, but because Cleveland has this, so I'm wondering if they can get away with it, why can't we get away with it and force everybody at that point to take the classes, to be certified? But again, we'll have to look at that. I don't know what legal would have to say, but again, it's for a broader discussion down the line when Mr. Berman's available, and we can dig deeper in on this.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Sheriff.
And thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morales.
And the last item I have for you is the House Bill 580, the mandatory CPR training. Currently, our EMTs, we consistently train the folks at the sheriff's office on first aid and CPR anyway. So we do that every 2 years or so. So
Okay.
yeah.
So when Mr. Berman's available, we'll have another meeting, we'll get deeper in this, because I think it's, again, it was brought to my attention because what they're doing at the courthouse and the amount of guests that these buildings have, I think it's only reasonable to have as many employees as possible trained and available and have the knowledge of where these things are, which, well, there's 3 in this building, I have no idea where they're at. And here we sit talking about it.
Right. Okay, I agree.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
To the sheriff, do we currently, when we have a fire drill, has somebody mandated to, I know when I worked in the county, everybody had a job duty that they either had to get employees out or make sure, do we have that instituted for the AEDs where a specific employee or staff is going to grab that and make sure that they take it in case it was a real fire, in case something really happened in a stairwell or something like that? Do we do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do. Our EMTs usually have them, but the good thing about the AEDs, they're very, very simple to use. As soon as you open the box, they talk you through every step. So even if you're a novice, if you've never seen this device, it has pictures and instructions, and it automates you on what to do. So, but currently right now, our EMTs, if there was a situation like that, the EMTs will respond with the AEDs.
Okay, even during a fire drill?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Sheriff, if you wouldn't mind, I see the folks from the fairgrounds here. I wanted to get them in and get them out.
Okay.
Have a quick discussion on the situation out there.
Awesome. All right.
And then
Thank
I'll
you.
bring it back if that's what you wish.
Thank you.
We don't get to see you that often, so.
All right,
Our
I
friends
see.
from the
Thanks.
fairgrounds, if you would, please.
Thank you, Council. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Fowler. I'm president of the Cuyahoga County Agriculture Society, and attending with me today are Carl Cooley, our vice president, and Joanne Scudder, who is our director of sustainability. I've been president of the Agriculture Society for the past 4 years, and I've served on the Fair Board for about 18 years. And in the last 4 years, we've established a great turnaround for the Agriculture Society and the Fair Board. That turnaround has been a degree of accountability, a streamlining of the board of directors, reduction in the number of directors, and in multiplying the task of and duplication, eliminating duplication of the task of the directors. That has afforded us a stronger financial position. We have I can say that we're solid and we're good. We're not super rich, but we're able to sustain and continue forward without the threat of financial insecurity. That financial stream comes from a number of entities throughout the fair this year. The fair being the primary item, but in addition to that, we have buckets that bring income in throughout the year. Those items being festivals that are held, storage of boats and cars during the non-fair season. We have a number of shows that go on throughout the year. There is at any given time, on any given weekend, some activity going on at the fairgrounds, from winter chili opens to summer Oktoberfest. So that, in addition to operating and taking control of the flea market, has become very popular and a lot of visibility for the residents within the county. The mission of the fairgrounds, established earlier in our time, but to continue forward, is to educate past and present agricultural practices and to include sustainability and technology, both past, present, and future. And with that, I know that you're aware of the wind turbine that's on our fairgrounds, as well as the educational center with the solar panels and the continuing input of reduced current use on the fairground property that's put into the grid and reimbursed on a monthly basis towards our electrical charges. History of the fair, I think most of us know, but to refresh, We are a setup of the State of Ohio Land Grant Program, where each county is established and must maintain and continue an agricultural society in the state of Ohio. And with that, we are charged with conducting an annual fair for that county on a scheduled basis determined through the state schedule. Historically, the fair has been the main event based on tradition and as well as entertainment, as well as a number of things. One of the highlights for the county when it was much different than we know it today. But we've taken that procedure and made it into our mission and produced a product that becomes, we hope, very not only affordable to the public, but educational and very reputable to the county. I can tell you that recently within the state of Ohio, Cuyahoga County has certainly raised to a level of acceptance and credibility where it hadn't been before. And we are looked upon for a lot of leadership and guidance, as well as we seek that from our other partners in the 88 counties of the state and festivals that are held here. Specifically, I know the horse barn issue is one of our areas of revenue. We have had horses on the fairgrounds for more years than I really know, but for a long, long time. Some of those barns are still in the same style and form. Some of them were WPA buildings, if I recall. But the horses and the fairground relationship has been that the fair board, in this case, has served as the lessor, and we lease those buildings to an individual, or in some cases, several individuals that manage. They in turn rent those stables or stalls out to individuals within the county, maybe not all the county, but any individual can rent those on a month-to-month basis. Some of those relationships have some variations where the people attend the horses themselves on a daily, regular basis, and sometimes the manager will tend to those animals and care for them according to their agreement. With both those situations, the Fair Board has some legal stipulations, and the people that rent have legal stipulations, as well as the people that own the horses. The unfortunate situation that's occurred within the last several weeks or couple months, where some charges have been brought forward towards one of the people and families that have rented stalls from a manager regarding animal cruelty or undernourishment, and as was earlier announced, has been led to the death of one of the animals. Upon receiving that information from the APL, the Fair Board within 2 hours provided immediate positions for those horses to be moved into by the APL. And we housed those for a short period of time while the APL secured a more permanent situation on a rescue facility. During that time, we provided care. The Animal Protective League provided the food and veterinarian services. And so what we understand the APL steps in because these barns are located in the city of Berea, and Berea does not allow the housing of animals in their ordinances, so therefore they step back to the actual monitoring of those, and therefore it refers to the APL. We first heard of this incident through the APL's notification before stepping on board. Since that time, the party that has had the contract has been evicted and has vacated the premises. The horses that were in that barn, if they haven't been removed, there are 2 animals still there. They are the animals that the individual that's been charged with animal cruelty currently owns and is trying to seek different housing arrangements for those. This unfortunate incident did not set on the Fair Board easily and very lightly. Immediately when we learned about this, we announced that it certainly violates the Fair Board's mission of education and the proper care and treatment of animals along with good animal husbandry. It also provided the board to take full support of any actions and remedies for the current situation from all legal positions as a landlord, and supports all the efforts of any enforcement agencies towards a permanent solution. The Fair Board completely supported and cooperated with the Animal Protective League in giving information to the extent of the law where prosecution may be possible. And we have and will continue to completely cooperate with the legal system to the extent and eviction and prosecution of all animal care facilities on the grounds of the Cuyahoga County Fair, and in present and future, the housing of horses on the fairgrounds. The intent at this point to move forward, the Fair Board has taken initiatives to appoint a second person as being responsible for monitoring the buildings and the situation at the fair. Our vice president, who also has a long history of knowledge in animal care in large animals, particularly cattle, has taken on that responsibility with our member that was in charge of this and still is, who is a former animal warden for the city of Middleburg Heights. In addition to that, we've enlisted Berea City Council members to help form and improve a workable situation within their area of responsibility for the animal warden, and to help continue the efforts that they can bring both professional guidance and visibility and information to the board regarding the care of animals in the facility. Third, we are in the process of renewing our leases. Those are currently to be renewed May 1st of this year. In our leases, which if it doesn't presently contain language that would allow any infraction for any part of the lease to serve as a violation of the lease and to serve as eviction, we will inject that. We will put that in the leases. Additionally, with stronger language being added to the into the language being written and has been acknowledged by the board, approved by the board, that will provide language that will allow the entrance into any barn that contains animals at any time and for any purpose with any authority, local, county, or state, for the direct inspection and to view the entire operation of animal and the care of the animals. That isn't presently in our lease, but that will be added into the lease May 1st. The new leases will be introduced to the current barn managers, and we currently have a yearly meeting with the barn managers to go over any needs and situations beyond what we can witness and see from our week-to-week or day-to-day routine visits by our personnel. We will move that to a we'll do that twice a year instead of once a year. And we also have asked our two Fair Board representatives to report to the Fair Board in a more detailed information with their monthly observations in a written checklist, which would include dates, rental payments, and note any deficiencies of violation to the board, for which then the board would follow through on language within the leases for, if necessary, eviction under any of those policies. We've taken this head on. We've cleaned up a lot of items within the fairgrounds in the operation of that over the last several years. We look at this as another one of those obligations that we have and will take care of. I personally have a strong desire to make the horse barn area a more interactive facility within the fairgrounds. We would welcome and hope that that could become more of a educational as well and more of a visible part of the fair week that we participate in. We are certainly desirous of the county's involvement at this level, and certainly from the sheriff's level. We welcome that, and we'll continue to support and work that area as we need to. We have had acknowledgement from the council that there's some legal assistance that may be available, which we are welcoming, and will take an opportunity to share with. There's also been an effort to do some signage and maybe some more informational signage within the fairgrounds and on the fair barns particularly, of which the county has stepped forward and offered to help in those type of areas. In the big picture, we see a great opportunity for horses in an urban area. There's over 100 horses on the fairgrounds and possibly over 100 people that participate in the ownership and the enjoyment and the enthusiasm of those horses. We'd like to still continue that, but we're not satisfied with the way things are. We have a great deal of cleanup to do, which the weather is now turning the corner, that we vow that we'll take that on and get that done, just from a visible standpoint. And on the big picture, we really see a great opportunity if we can collaborate together to reach out and put a state-of-the-art horse facility in the fairgrounds that would serve every resident that desires within the county that could participate in therapy with horses for people with needs, special needs. It could be used as an educational facility for school programs. It could open up opportunities for people that are unaware of agricultural opportunities for occupations for the future. And we also see it a great opportunity to expand into the youth and the development of children from the city and the inner city particularly that would not have these opportunities. So I stand before you to pledge that I will do everything within my power to see that this happens.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler.
Thank you.
And I know that, and I don't want to dwell on the past, and I know there's been charges filed, but it was disturbing to hear that, and I'm sure it disturbed you. But what was even more disturbing, at least to me, and I think Ms. Simon, was the fact that we had to send a deputy sheriff or investigator out and found 2 more horses that were in a bad spot. And that got us a little bit upset. And I appreciate all that you're doing and moving forward and how quickly that you have implemented changes. I know you met with Ms. Simon, and I would ask her if the meetings that she had with you were helpful and going forward, are we in the right spot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we had the opportunity to meet at the fairgrounds on Friday and went through a lot of detail about the past, but more importantly, how to move forward in the future. And I'm satisfied with the plan. I just want to make sure that it's implemented and that the new leases that are finalized from the board be sent to us, to Joe Nani, our chief of staff. I'd like our legal department to take a look at those leases because this can never happen again. I mean, to have a horse starve on our property and have other horses having to be taken out by our sheriff, thank you, Sheriff, very much. But this is just unacceptable, and we're all on the same page about that. At the end of the day, it's the buck stops with the county. We own this land. And as I sit here, if I ever see anything like this again, I will really move forward to shut down this horse operation because no animal should die again in this way in these days. I mean, we're in the 21st century, and how this fell through the crack we talked about, but I'm hoping now we'll have constant monitoring and veterinarians taking a look and our sheriff stopping in and the APL involved. But I'm satisfied with the plan. I just hope it's implemented. So maybe we can be sure to have a routine communication, which would be helpful, I think, to this council and as well. Thank you.
Are veterinary services going to be within the body of the lease?
Not from our standpoint of mandating that, no. One thing that we are very careful of is we do not want the full responsibility of managing those barns. And the reason for that is, obviously, it would step aside of having a barn manager. We would have direct input. But we also feel that we need professional support, not only from a veterinarian standpoint, but from a nutritional standpoint and from animal breeding practices and a number of things that Fair Board currently doesn't have. That is certainly something that could be something to consider down the road, but it's a greater undertaking, and it's really at this point here trying to take a stronger position from a landlord standpoint, be able to afford the opportunity to get in at any time, which hadn't been there before, and to enlist the strength of either local authorities, be it the county or be it the local, or from a professional side, whether it's professional horse people or professional veterinarians or what have you, to enter at any time around the clock whenever that need would be brought to our attention or when we would witness that ourselves. So we're trying to take a stronger position from a landlord standpoint, but not the management of the buildings. I'm sorry, the horses.
It would seem to me that we are further down the road with the recent past history, and to mandate that at least a veterinarian be on board with what's going on over there. I don't know why you would lease anything out to anyone. Why wouldn't that be in the lease, that the owners have to prove to us, you, that they've been checked by a veterinarian on a reasonable, whatever the timeline is for animals of that stature? Why wouldn't we put that in there to force the owners to maintain their responsibilities? And again, I'm sure that 98%, 99% of the owners and anybody that owns a horse I know is passionate, but unfortunately we found that 1% that has thrown egg all over our face and our good name. And again, like Ms. Simon says, we don't want it to happen again. I don't know why we're at that threshold now of a new day. Why aren't we taking that opportunity to put that in the language of the lease?
I don't want to mislead you to say that it isn't. The lease that we have is a fairly strong lease. It provides us a number of areas of which eviction could be rendered. One of the areas is the proper care of animals and the proper treatment of animals. So those items there are already in the lease, but the availability to get in to look at those hasn't been. So now that'll couple the opportunity to get in with ourselves or with authorities, with the veterinarian. And it also is spoken of care being professional. At any given time, you could see a furrier's truck parked at any barn. You could see a veterinarian's truck. They are there. It's up to the individual to call them, not the fair board or not the animal warden per se. But, when we provide the copy of the lease, I think you or your legal department will see that there's some strength in it already. And if anything, maybe a little bit of deficiency on our part to carry out some of those items that are already there. I'm sure the legal will support that. If not, we'll work with them to obtain what we need.
Well, at least I think from this committee standpoint, that we'll turn you over to the capable hands of Ms. Simon, and trust me, I know you will be watched. But I think it is a broad brush that we have language like that that's kind of open-ended. I think that led to the circumstances that we have, but I don't want to muddy the waters at this point in time. And as I said, Ms. Simon being available and the watchdog from us will be sufficient. But I thank you for coming. I know it was a situation that nobody wants to hear about, but it was disturbing the second instance when we had to send out the detective to find 2 more animals, and that was the thing that was bad enough. The first one, the second one was just as bad in that we just found horses before they perished. So.
Yeah, I would like to let you know, we do feel that there is a lot of street talk, possibly some falseness in some of the things that might come from the day-to-day. But, we are monitoring physically the grounds daily. The APL is there every other day. They're not only looking at the current barn that we're discussing, but the general situation. So we're keeping a direct dialogue with those people as well. We welcome and thank you for the time today.
Any questions from the committee? Anything further? No.
To the chair, how many are on the Fair Board?
There are 15 directors on the Fair Board. The charter calls for 21.
Okay, and so if the charter calls for 21, why do we have 15?
For efficiency and for better transparency and better accountability.
Okay, so a lower number is better?
It has been. It's served us better.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being
You're
here.
welcome.
Thank you. Sheriff, did you want, where'd the sheriff go? Did you want to continue on with directing? Or they're just going to come up when they're done?
No, I was done.
Okay, thank you. George Brandy, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, council members. I'm George Taylor, Director of Public Safety and Justice Services. This is Brandy Carney, my administrator. I'm going to quickly go over the status of the CCOMS and the EOC projects, both of which are on schedule. The CCOMS is scheduled to begin or to move into their new facility at Chagrin Valley on April 4th. And on April 8th, there will be a press event at Chagrin Valley. The EOC is on target for a mid-June completion. The construction on the room itself should be wrapped up by mid-May, which will give IT the opportunity to get in there and install the items that they need to install so that that can be up and running by July. And the completion date for the EOC is June, mid-June. We've been assured by both IT, Public Works, and Chagrin Valley that CCOMS and EOC will both be up and going on schedule as was promised and was presented to the council and this committee.
Can you tell us how many employees will be over there?
At
CCOM?
which, CCOMS? 25.
The entire CCOM staff includes 25 employees, and they will all be moving over there on April 4th.
And for the committee, the location?
The location is, and I can give you the exact address, it's 88 Center Street, Bedford, Ohio, the lower level of Bedford Hospital.
And we came to that location by what means?
We looked at several different facilities and locations, and this is the one that met our needs the best.
Questions? Mr. Greenspan?
Thank you. Just on the financial side of these two facilities, can you provide an overview as to the projects? Are they within budget, within financial budget? And if so, is there, or do you anticipate any cost savings or unused appropriation?
Currently, both projects are within budget. At this point, I can't say that there would be any surplus until we get a little bit closer to both projects being completed.
But you don't anticipate the request for additional funds?
No, I don't.
Okay, on either one?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other? Ms. Simon?
Just quick, what's the status of the cities coming together for joint dispatch in that area of South Euclid? Where are we at with that?
Ms. Carney's going to address that
Oh,
in
good.
her part of this.
So I can go on to discuss the consolidations happening within the county. If this committee recalls, in March of 2013, we released the 911 consolidation plan. At that time, there were 48 primary public safety answering points, or PSAPs, in the county. Those are dispatch centers. Standing here today, there are 32 primary PSAPs. 6 of those are regional dispatch centers, and 25 are individual dispatch centers. The regional centers that are currently throughout the county include the Southeast Communications Center in Bedford, which has 4 communities involved. The Chagrin Valley Dispatch, which is in Bedford Hospital also, that currently has 13 communities that they dispatch for. CCOMS will also be co-locating with Chagrin Valley in the basement of Bedford Hospital. We currently take CCOMS, the 911 center for Cuyahoga County. We currently take all 911 calls for Cuyahoga County, and we also dispatch for 1 community. Strongsville Dispatch is in Strongsville, and there's 4 communities that participate in that center currently. Parma Dispatch, which opened last year, currently has 3 communities, and the Cuyahoga Heights Regional Dispatch has 4 communities involved. Very soon, there's been a lot of discussion on these following 3. One is the EDGE consolidation. That will include the Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, South Euclid, and University Heights. They are working towards a consolidated dispatch. they seem to be moving forward, and I expect sometime this year. Just recently, they sent us some operational costs and plans and build-out plans that they've been working on. There's also much discussion with Brook Park going into Parma in the next few months ahead, as well as I know last night, for example, at Solon Council, there was an initial reading for Solon to go to Chagrin Valley. So again, just showing all of the consolidations that are happening. The Department of Public Safety, myself, the director, and Chief Boba, as well as the Director of Regional Collaboration and his team, have gone to many and continue to go to all of the unaffiliated dispatch centers and encourage them to join a regional dispatch center. We usually don't tell them, where to go, but give them the options, propose, what options might be best to them, and try and encourage both the fire and police chiefs as well as mayors to join.
Questions?
Through the chair to Brandy. So we're at 32 PSAPs now, and how are we doing in your estimation in regards to getting down to what our final goal is of 5? And I could be wrong on the number that the state gave us.
Sure. Again, throughout the close of this year, I expect at least another probably 8, the 8 that we discussed, if not more. And, with the work of regional collaboration that continues, I think that 5 would always be a difficult number. 10 years is a long time away, but 5 would be a difficult number. But I do see us getting closer and closer to at least somewhere between 10 and 20. I don't know if the director or Mr. Kraus, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, once we, I think the 2 things that are going to fall into place shortly, obviously the opening of CCOMs. Many of the communities are waiting to hopefully join CCOMs, and they're waiting to see the opening. And the second is, as Brandy said, we're working, and we hope to finalize the agreement with the EDGE group, which is Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and South Euclid. We anticipate that shortly. And many of the cities in the Hillcrest area are waiting on the finalization of that agreement to be able to join a regional dispatch center. So as what Brandy pointed out is the regional dispatch centers are starting to mirror the regions of the county. We will have a Heights Hillcrest group. We're going to have the Southeast group, which is located in the basement of the Bedford Heights Hospital. It's Bedford Heights, Garfield Heights, and Maple Heights. Obviously, we have the Southeast Law Enforcement, which is the Chagrin Valley, who work together, on a daily basis in the Chagrin Valley. We have the Valley Group, which is Cuyahoga Heights, Newburgh Heights, and we anticipate some movement with Independence, Brecksville, and Broadview that comprises the Valley Group. Obviously, we have the Parma Group, the Parma Heights, Brooklyn, and Brook Park. Southwest, which is the Strongsville Group, and the one last piece we're hoping to consolidate is the West Shore, who has worked together for many, many years, but it's just the firefighters that work together and consolidated at St. John's Hospital. And we anticipate, with the work of the mayors out there, to consolidate both police and fire. So there you have really the entire regional consolidation of the PSAS. But we think once CCOMs and the Heights Hillcrest group are finalized, many of the folks realize that they have to join a regional center, that they can't operate in the long term on their own. So. And we anticipate calling a meeting once this is finalized with all the mayors who are unaffiliated and making sure that they understand their options with the regional consolidation.
Mr. Germano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was going to ask kind of the same question, but now it seems that we're talking that there's going to be 8 regional centers. What we're looking with the expansion.
We have 6 now, and you know what, I apologize, I didn't include the city of Cleveland, so that would be 7, and with the possibility of West Shore, so 8, and there's some that may not consolidate, right? There's communities out there that might operate on their own and will continue to, so I think a manageable number might be again between 8 and, anywhere from 10 to 15, knowing that not everyone will consolidate.
So how does that relate to the 5 that only 5 are going to be getting the funding? Is that
So currently CCOMS, so the county receives funding, and because we take all the wireless calls for the county, and we share some of that funding with Cleveland. The requirement for 2018, that's in ORC for 5 dispatch centers, is specific to wireless dispatch centers, which are the first point of a wireless, so a cell phone call. So right now, that law is only applicable to CCOMS and Cleveland. However, if others were in fact to be the first ones to take their calls, some of these regional dispatch centers, then that is something that the number couldn't surpass 5. But right now, that law only applies to CCOMS and the city of Cleveland for the funding piece of it. We still do encourage people to consolidate. Even though the law was put into effect, the purpose is to encourage that there's not this one-person dispatch center, a single person sitting in a chair. So the rules are still hopefully apply to everybody, but specific to the funding, that's only for the wireless PSAPs.
My only comment is, daily we see more and more people discontinuing their house phone and they're going to cell phones. And I have a feeling it's going to be accelerating to the point where it's going to be predominantly cell phones.
We see it. I've seen the curve over the last few years looking at CCOM's numbers. Obviously, less and less landlines.
Mr. Greenspan.
Great, and actually, I was going to bring up the point that Mr. Germana raised. The law only requires 4 or 5, in order to be eligible for the 911 funding appropriation, only 4 or 5, depending on the size of the county. But it brings up another question. If there are 2 right now in Cuyahoga County and a third wanted to start receiving wireless, what would the process be do they have to get county approval to start taking their own and be eligible for partial reimbursement?
Ohio Revised Code currently has a 911 planning committee that's set up. It includes representation from the county, the city of Cleveland, the largest city, which is the city of Parma. There's a mayor's and manager's rep and a township trustee. So those 5 people, and they are the ones that have the authority to keep the plan for Cuyahoga County 911 and in that plan. So that's the body that would vote on that.
So those 5 then would be the body that, so if a third community wanted to apply, would that body be the body to say yes or no?
It would be a body because of the number of regional dispatch centers right now. It would be difficult to approve, 1 to 2, because anything past that, we would just, we would not receive funding. It would be reduced by 50%, but yes, that is correct. That's another reason why the smaller number, the smaller number that we get down to for regional dispatch centers, then there might be an option to move the wireless calls around, but right now we only have the 2 wireless. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Ms. Carney, for those that are unaware, has been on this since we've been here and before. So you're the lone survivor, and to be honest, we wouldn't be where we're at without you and others from the past, but most specifically you. And we had a long walk down a very dark hallway
Yes.
on many eggshells to get where we're at right now, to make it important and make it important to get that information to the communities to understand what we were doing. And that was not an easy task. And I know Mr. Greenspan was at a couple of meetings that I think some of that riot gear that we're getting here in Cleveland would have been handy at. But this has not been easy. But it's been, I think, the most important move that this new county government has been able to move forward. And it's been right now a mild success. As we move forward, it'll become a bigger success. But we're very happy that you've been staying with us and leading this charge, and with George here coming on board has not hurt the situation.
I appreciate all the help, and I also appreciate you acknowledging her for her hard work.
It's something that I don't think many people see, but it's painfully obvious to us that have been trying to do this, how important the mission has been, and to get where we're at and to get the CCOMs located where they're at. It hasn't been easy politically or I would imagine in any other way. But we're here and we're moving forward, and we've got some other things on the table that will bring Cleveland Heights, Univers Heights, and those folks in. So we're moving. We're very happy, I think, as a committee, and look forward to move forward with you and George into
Thank
the
you.
future.
I just want to say, I so appreciate council's help with this initiative also. As you said, it's been, there's been a lot of movement the last few years and a lot of funding that's also supported this effort, so thank you.
Well, we haven't always been the easiest people to deal with, but our hearts are in the right location, as now the PSAPs are. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Gilson, before you start, Doctor, did Mr. Bo, did you want to touch with the sheriff on Euclid Jail quickly, and then I want to dedicate the rest of the day to Dr. Gilson?
I could speak on the Euclid Jail. Frank Bove again. Euclid Jail is running at full capacity. The sheriff has, I think the daily count is anywhere between 70 and 80, and that's including the Euclid prisoners. So it's running at full capacity, and it's all the construction, everything's been done out there. It's running the way we expected it to right now. So, any other questions?
Mr. Greenspan.
Just quickly, the cost, are we maintaining the cost? I know earlier we were over budget because we weren't able to, well, two things. Number one, provide the proper amount of inmate billing, even though it was internal. And also there were some concerns with additional costs of the facility. Has all that been captured, and are we on track?
It's all been captured, and everything's stabilized out there now.
So no additional capital improvements or expenditures that we're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of standing here, but I will check, and if there is any, I'll report back.
And the Euclid component of the project to which we advanced them money, to which we're going to be recouped, that $250,000, is that the number? Is that the correct number? I somewhat remember that. Anyhow, did they reach, whatever the number was, did they exceed that, or are we within that range?
I would have to check with fiscal
I
year.
think we're within that range.
Okay.
And that number is 250, I believe.
Okay, and we're collecting the reimbursement?
Yes, I
As-
just
as
sent a letter
scheduled.
out to the city of Euclid last week.
Okay. Now, they're, if I remember, the contract reserves a certain number of occupancy for their inmates, and if they don't reach that, we're able to fill those beds, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Have they been reaching their daily allotment, their ADP, or are we able to, so we're able to fill those?
We're able to fill those, that's correct.
Can we put federal prisoners in that jail, or do we just keep them
No.
downtown?
Yeah, we
Yeah, we keep them downtown.
Okay, because there's a high revenue component with those folks. Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything further? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Gilson, good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Good afternoon, Chairman Gallagher, members of council. I'm Dr. Tom Gilson. I'm the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. I'm the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner and Director of the Crime Laboratory. And I was invited today to talk some about an update on the heroin and fentanyl related deaths in our county, which actually is very timely given the month of March. You should all have the packet.
We had a very bad stretch there, and we had scheduled this weeks ago, so it is timely. I wanted to recognize Mr. Denahan from the.
I was going to
Adams Boards
introduce
here.
who was here with me. but,
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you.
From my office, I have Dr. Joe Filo, who was the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner, and Hugh Shannon, who's my administrator. And on my left, in the front row, is Vince Carafi from the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. He's the Injury Prevention Program Coordinator, and he's also the Chair of the Cuyahoga County Opiate Task Force. And as you mentioned, Bill Denahan, who is the Executive Director of the Adams Board. And I just invited these folks if there were additional questions, as I think this talk will probably generate. I would direct your attention to the handout that we have, which I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I really have to put this epidemic in perspective. Right now, if we use the SAMHSA data, These are the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration data. We would estimate that approximately a First Energy stadium full number of our citizens are abusing pain medications. And of that group, about a third, or enough to fill the queue, will transition to using heroin. And if we flip over the next page, the top is 2015. This is the number of people we saw who died from heroin overdoses, which is enough to fill a jumbo jet and a commuter plane with fentanyl overdoses. I'll flesh out numbers on this. If we look at 2016, based on our data so far, we'll still have that same number of heroin overdoses roughly, but the problem's really being magnified by the introduction of fentanyl at really what I can only characterize as alarming numbers. In terms of what's happened recently,
Doctor, could you distinguish between heroin and fentanyl?
they're both narcotics. Narcotics in general are derived from the morphine molecule, and if you put different chemical groups on it, you can increase the potency of them. Heroin has approximately 5 times the potency of morphine. Fentanyl has approximately 40 to 80 times the potency of morphine. Originally, heroin is a Schedule I drug. It has no accepted medical use. Fentanyl is a Schedule II drug. It's used in cardiac anesthesia. It's also used for pain control in form usually of a transdermal patch. And then as an anesthetic, it can be used as a lollipop for children or intravenously. These are very, very potent drugs, and fentanyl at an exponentially higher degree of potency than morphine or even heroin. To move on to what's going on since the 10th of March, we've had 23 deaths that were attributable to heroin or fentanyl. 9 of these were in the city of Cleveland residents and 14 in the suburbs, which is something we're starting to see, especially more with fentanyl, that this is more of a problem that's showing up in suburbs. But traditionally, we've had about a 50-50 split in terms of our heroin overdoses, and certainly with this, we're probably seeing a skewing to the suburbs based on the fentanyl, but still certainly a big problem with heroin in both areas. Ages, the victims were from 23 to 62. I'll go over more general data other than just this recent stretch. Again, most of our victims are male, most are Caucasian, at about a 3-to-1 ratio for male to female, and about a 75 to 85% Caucasian. What's alarming about what's going on now is if we looked at 2015, basically for all drugs, not just heroin and fentanyl, we averaged about 1 overdose a day. Since the start of 2016, we've had about 1 overdose a day just from heroin and fentanyl, and in the last 3 weeks, that number is approaching 2 overdoses a day. I think this graph that you see here, like a first grader could interpret that this problem is getting substantially worse. What this shows is our average number of overdose deaths in Cuyahoga County from heroin and fentanyl over the last 5 years, and then since the beginning of 2016. If we project out based on those numbers to the end of the year where we'll end up, we're looking probably at about 1,000 deaths, and about 700 of those will be related to heroin and fentanyl.
On that point, can I just ask Dr. Gilson, why aren't they separated out? Why do you use the heroin and the fentanyl? Usually because it's mixed, or?
Actually, as I go further, Councilwoman, we will separate them out. I think one of the reasons to lump them together is that they're frequently sold on the street as heroin. I think people are starting to just sell things as fentanyl, but they act very similarly and they seem to target a similar population, but we are starting to see some difference in terms of location of the abusers and age as well. These are just our heroin and fentanyl deaths from the beginning of this year. And I should add, all of these are record-setting months. January set a new record, February, and March is well on its way to establishing that record. The red is fentanyl, the blue is heroin, and then we have a certain number of things that are combined. That's the green color, and then purple off on the left side there is what we've seen just since St. Patrick's Day. 8 deaths, which unfortunately was actually less than we had the weekend before, which was 13. Similar time frame, Thursday to Sunday. I should add too that this presentation is all on our website, so I'll go through some things kind of quickly just as an overview. But if we look at the last 6 years, we've had 1,000 overdose deaths related to heroin. And this next page breaks those down by residents of the decedent and incidents of the place where the injury occurred by council district. And I think the thing I would just take away from that is that nobody's council district's been immune to this. We have a certain percentage of incidents that are unknown just because we don't know where somebody was actually abusing drugs. They may have come home intoxicated and died there. But long story short, we're not looking at something that's confined to any one part of the county. The next couple of pages are just going to be different graphs showing the residences and incidences of fentanyl and heroin overdoses plotted as just different points on a graph. The first one is the fentanyl by residence, again showing the preponderance of, everywhere, not really one localized spot. Flip to the next graph. This is where the overdoses that we know where they took place occurred, again widely distributed. And the heroin are the blue dots. Next one is by decedent residents. I should add that we have a certain percentage of decedents who live in the counties adjacent to ours too, who die in Cuyahoga County. And the last one here is the heroin by incidence location. And I think, one of the things that we've noticed over and over again is how a lot of these dots seem to represent or mirror our interstate system, Interstate 90, 77, and 71. And that's a well-known distribution method that people will just basically pull off the highway to dealers to sell drugs and then get back on the highway. And the individuals may use the drugs close to the point of purchase. I think I've shown you all this graph multiple times, but it's updated for 2015. The next graph is our most common drugs of abuse cited in overdose fatalities. This is now 10 years, 2006 to 2015. I think things I draw attention to, obviously, the rapid rise of heroin, which is in dark blue. It was somewhat gratifying to see that number go down in 2015, but the purple line at the bottom is fentanyl, and it more than offset the success that we had with heroin. The light blue line are all of the prescription drugs, which appear to have plateaued, prescription narcotics. So these were the drugs that frequently are the gateway to using other narcotics like heroin and fentanyl illegally. And they seem to have plateaued and bounced around, but our big problem now in terms of substance abuse is heroin and now fentanyl. This is just kind of showing monthly trends, quarterly trends with heroin-related deaths from 2011 to 2015. I think this is a very telling graph, the next one, which shows annual heroin-related mortality. And as you go out to the left for 2013, 14, and 15, this graph also includes the deaths, heroin and fentanyl. 2013, fentanyl really wasn't an issue. At the end of the year in 2014, things really started to take off. And obviously 2015 was a much more dramatic rise. The other thing I draw attention to is the purple graph in 2014 and the pink and blue graph, hashed graph for 2015. These are the projected deaths we would have experienced without Project Dawn. One of the things that the executive and council have been very supportive of is a naloxone distribution program. We initially started with addicts. That was expanded to include families and first responders and law enforcement. This is probably one of the greatest investments we made in this epidemic because, if you look at that last bar, that's 390 deaths that would have taken place without that program, whereas what we see between heroin with fentanyl is 228. We're saving a lot of people. It's just the scope of the problem is enormous, and we're losing a lot of people too. This is another graph kind of comparing 2013, 14, and 15, showing the really just very, very rapid rise of fentanyl over that time frame. We thought last summer that fentanyl had slowed down, but unfortunately it raged back in the last quarter of 2015, and that's obviously almost a 2.5 to tripling of our mortality from 2014 and substantially higher than 2013. In terms of heroin and fentanyl, next graph will show mixtures and the drugs in isolation. So of our fentanyl overdoses, 47 in 2015 occurred with heroin, 44 did not. We do see a trend this year that there's less mixture, and we frequently see fentanyl in isolation without heroin. That's also borne out. I'm the head of the drug chemistry, or the crime laboratory. The drug chemistry lab has reported we're seeing more drug seizures, just fentanyl, not mixed with heroin. Early 2015, and still to ongoing, we do see a certain amount of heroin mixed with fentanyl. And then the bottom graph here is the heroin deaths where fentanyl was not present, and that's bounced around, but it went down significantly in 2015. This is the next graph for fentanyl deaths, just demonstrated graphically from 2014 through 2016. As I mentioned, we had a spike at the end of 2014. 15 bounced around. It seemed like it was coming down in the fall, and then since December, we've just been off on a very rapid course, a rapid rise. To put this in perspective, the next graph will show you how long it took for us to have 100 fentanyl deaths on record. The blue represents approximately 104 months from 2006 to September 2014. We were able to equal that number of fentanyl-related overdoses in just over a year. And this year, just from October to March, we have 78 deaths. We'll probably eclipse that within 6 months. This problem is escalating very rapidly. In the interest of time and other people and being able to answer questions, the next series of graphs are going to be demographics showing, again, predominantly male gender for fentanyl, white race, fentanyl, similar things for heroin. It is notable that we have a higher percentage of women who are dying from fentanyl than from heroin. The next graph is ages. Up until last year, our most common age group who overdosed were actually older individuals, the 45 to 60-year-olds. What we saw in 2015 is that group dropped rather precipitously, and we saw a bigger rise in the 30 to 44-year-olds, as well as something of a bump from the 18 to 29-year-olds. That change is largely driven by overdoses of heroin mixed with fentanyl, and the graph over on the left side shows the younger age group is much more represented in the fentanyl overdose group, so it's a slightly younger group, 30 to 45. Traditionally, the heroin overdoses that we had tended to be older than that. If you look at our data for residents, we're about 50-50, city of Cleveland, suburbs, and when we factor in the individuals who die from out of county, it skews towards the suburbs, about 60-40. Next graph is fentanyl by incidence location, and this was what I was starting to mention a little bit earlier. This seems to show an overrepresentation of suburbs and out of county deaths relative to the city. I really would say the heroin deaths have traditionally shown about an equal split, and then that pushed to the majority when we factor in the individuals from outside of Cuyahoga County who are either coming here to use drugs or transported here after they've overdosed. This is just a breakdown of where in the suburbs we're seeing individuals pass away from fentanyl. This is similar to our data for heroin in that we see a bigger group in Lakewood and Parma. Next graph is by incidence location, which is when we know where the overdose took place as opposed to where the individual lived, plotted out. And I think, again, you see that Lakewood, Euclid, because I think its proximity to the highway, and Parma, again, represented there, and Brook Park as well. And these are just summary tables, the last two, in terms of total number of suburban heroin deaths over the time from 2006 to 2015. Again, certain communities more represented in the residence data, and then that anomaly that we see in Euclid, which again may be a reflection of the fact that the interstate traffic that passes through there may bump their numbers up. I could talk a lot more about this, but I think you've heard enough. It's a bad problem. Be happy to answer any questions, or if there's other individuals here who could answer them.
Questions for Dr. Gilson? Mr. Germano. Thank you very much, Doctor. How does these statistics, Cuyahoga County, compare to the other urban counties like Franklin, Cincinnati?
It's a good
Toledo?
question. Cincinnati had 198 heroin overdoses in 2015. That's the only urban center in Ohio that had more deaths from the heroin than we did, and their numbers for fentanyl were higher. And fentanyl as a problem hit the southern part of the state a lot earlier than it did for us. Those numbers are rapidly becoming similar for Cuyahoga County and Hamilton County. Franklin County has had less heroin deaths than we have and less fentanyl deaths, but again, their numbers have followed the same trend ours have over this time period, that they're rising rapidly. Toledo, I don't have numbers. Lucas County, I don't have numbers for, but the three big urban centers that I mentioned, we, in terms of the fentanyl, I think we're probably on a much more rapid trajectory, especially this year. And the heroin, I think everybody is seeing, but we're very much catching up to the southern part of the state.
I guess my second part of that is, when we see these dots where it's all over Cuyahoga County, doesn't matter how dense the population is or not, it seems, is this happening in the farm counties, the less what do you say, non-urban? I don't know what you call them, but the non-urban counties, is there a crisis happening elsewhere in Ohio?
Absolutely. What happened, to kind of go back into the 1990s and early 2000s, we have a significant problem in Ohio and in the country in general, overprescribing pain medication. From my time on the East Coast, that was actually more of a rural phenomenon through the late 1990s, early 2000s. And street drugs like heroin and cocaine were more common in the cities. As we created a population of addicted people using prescription pain medication, we tried to clamp down on it in Ohio, closing down pill mills, tighter regulation. This is a population that was ready-made to transition to heroin. So the heroin problem definitely is out in the rural communities, and it's far worse now in the city than it was before. But it's not a problem it has probably different potential origins in the city than in the suburbs. But honestly, it starts and ends with overprescribing a pain medication.
Where does the fentanyl come from? That comes from prescription drugs? Is that where the fentanyl comes from?
If you had looked back 2006, 2007, I would have said yes. They were probably diverted, especially the pain patches you would put on, and they lose potency after a few days, but they still have a big reservoir of fentanyl in there. People would smoke those. They would try to draw the contents out with a syringe, somehow chew them. That was the truth up until, probably about 2 to 3 years ago. At that point, the majority of fentanyl that we're seeing entering our county is clandestinely manufactured, most likely China, some in Mexico, and funneled through Mexican drug routes up to this county and other parts of the Midwest. The distribution of these drugs, I think, is potentially somewhat different than on the coast, which had traditional sources from the Far East for heroin. Our heroin mostly came from Mexico, and I think now it's probably true that the vast majority of heroin and fentanyl across the country are finding their way here through Mexico.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you. So, Dr. Gilson, thanks for your work on this. And we've seen some success with the heroin through all the meetings, the public meetings, the education, the Narcan changes in the law enabling us to use it and curbing the depth. What can we do now for fentanyl? I mean, is it the same approach? What can we do to start to attack this in the same way we did with the heroin?
It's a good question. I think naloxone itself does work with fentanyl, just as it does with any of the other narcotics. Because of its potency, I think the window of opportunity to reverse somebody who's overdosing on fentanyl is much more narrow. So we do have to do a better job, I think, reaching out to the people who are using drugs with other people as opposed to the ones who would come home. We would frequently hear that story about heroin, that the addict had come home, gone to sleep, slept all night, stopped snoring at some point when they died, and their family would find them dead in the morning. I don't know that that's as typical a scenario for fentanyl. It certainly is possible. But the widest distribution we can have for naloxone is a good beginning. And I think these numbers bear out the success of that program dramatically in spite of their worsening status. I think the other piece, and it was one of the reasons I thought Mr. Dennehan would be a nice addition here, is we have to really start to rethink our treatment options. And we've had some discussions with different folks about, can we lift the cap on the number of beds that can be in a treatment facility? Currently, that's capped at 16 by Medicare regulations in the wake of places like Byberry in my hometown and Willowbrook in New York City, where they were basically warehousing mentally ill patients, and the cap was put on to avoid this sort of mass institutionalization. That handicaps our ability to treat people with drug addiction now. So a waiver of that is something that's been in discussion with the executive and with other people outside of county government as well. That's a serious option we have to think about. And we absolutely have to just keep hammering away at prescribing a pain medication. What's hard about that, and what we've talked about it, is reimbursement in the medical system is based on patient satisfaction. And one of the criteria that was added in the 1990s to assess adequacy of treatment was how well is your pain controlled. That's like asking the addict to decide how much pain medicine they want. The consequence of that is a disaster. That has to be undone at some point.
Ms. Cadwell.
Yes, through the chair to Dr. Gilson, who do you think should push for the advertisement on TV as we do for cigarettes? Do you think that would, really awaken people that this is really a serious problem? I mean, we don't see any advertisements.
Frankly, I'd be pretty happy if we stopped advertising medicine on television like we stopped doing it for cigarettes. We're one of the only 2 countries in the world where we have open marketing for medications. And I can't say I see, as many oxycodone commercials as I see like Viagra commercials, but I think that puts a burden on the system and unrealistic expectations of pain control. And as I say, I feel like the prescribers, and we've looked at this, how many times do the prescribers, we have 5 prescribers to the same individual, 5 different prescribers within a year of each other prescribing pain medication. It's called doctor shopping. In 2013, that number was about 33% of the people who overdosed on heroin. We were able to get the data finally for 2014. It's down to 22%, but that's still 1 in 5 of our heroin overdose individuals, which is about 40 people, 200 doctors. Somebody's not checking our system. So I'm sorry to get out in the weeds on different things, but honestly, I think public service announcements are a great idea. I think ultimately we have to kind of cut the head of the serpent off, and stop putting this big supply out there for younger people to get addicted to, because that's overwhelmingly demonstrated in different ways, including data from our county. If you start out with a lot of people addicted to pain medication, you wind up almost in a parallel fashion with a lot of people overdosing from heroin, and now I think overdosing from fentanyl.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it has to be a combination of both, because the educational system with the doctors is taking a little too long to educate the doctors about the prescriptions and what they're writing, and we need to counteract it on the other side with advertisements. I mean, the graphic advertisements they have about cigarettes and what it does to you.
Those, yeah, sure.
We need something like that with drug-related, what heroin and fentanyl and these things really do to you.
I know the prosecutor had done the Let's Face It advertising, but that's been a little while, and I can't agree more. We've tried, we had a summit at our office about a month and a half ago where we wanted to get to high school students, because I think that's the other piece of education too, is trying to turn the demand off upstream with consequences. And it was a delightful thing to talk to the students, because they're not starting out as heroin addicts. They're not showing up at somebody's house with, can I buy a syringe and a bag of heroin? They're starting out with pain medicine. And it wasn't uncommon for them to say, I had my wisdom teeth pulled and I got a prescription for 30 Vicodin with a couple of refills on it. I don't know, I had my wisdom teeth pulled. I got about 2 days worth of codeine, and then I was on my own. And I don't think we have more pain than any parts of the world, yet we have 95% of all of the prescribed pain medication being used in this country.
Mr. Germano. Doctor, I don't know. I guess I'm confused. When I think of deaths from drugs, cocaine, heroin, I'm thinking recreational use. But from what you're saying, are more people, the users, actually, it's people in pain, not recreational? More people are dying because of pain than recreational use of narcotics and drugs?
I think it's the continuum that we see. If you go back to the first page of the presentation, I think somebody has, potentially an accident. We see an overrepresentation of people in the building trades, for example. They get prescribed pain medication more than they probably need. At any time, this is my interpretation, I think there's a certain percentage of the population who, if they take pain medication long enough, will become addicted to it. I think once they become addicted to it, we can kind of say that their use is no longer medical, whether it's recreational or dependency or addiction. I won't parse the terms, but it's not medical anymore. They may be able to play the system, the medical system, for a period of time where they're still getting pain medication, but truthfully, they're abusing their pain medication. That's our gang who are down at First Energy Stadium. Once that becomes obvious to the prescriber, turning off the valve of pain medication has this person still addicted, but no longer having access to legal pain medication. So they can go down the route of purchasing pain medicine, which we saw a lot with the oxycodone that was just flooding, especially rural parts of Ohio, in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Since then, the big development has been the just enormous influx of heroin into this part of the country, just the Midwest and coast in general. So these are people who aren't, I wouldn't say, experiencing the pain that got them started on pain medication. They've become addicted to pain medication, and that's how they get to heroin. Same effect, same receptors in the brain that oxycodone affects, but now heroin, because it's cheaper, they can get it, and fentanyl is probably as cheap as heroin, if not cheaper, and it's more potent. They're just chasing the drug to kind of relieve the symptoms of dependency or withdrawal from their dependency.
Is there a possibility, or is drug companies trying to research pain medication that may not be as addictive? I mean, is there a movement to that these people could replace their need to lessen pain with something that is not toxic? Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there a movement
and I have to
find
kind of
something
avoid my
that's-
personal feeling, which is that a lot of this crisis was manufactured by drug companies making obscene profits, just disregarding what we knew about the addictive qualities of these medications, especially treating chronic pain with them, which was never an accepted practice until the 1990s, that was a good long-term therapy. If you had a bad back or something, you weren't going to be given a prescription for oxycodone. That was a drug that was reserved for post-operative pain. It was reserved for terminal cancer pain, but it was not used for chronic pain. And with the paradigm shift in medicine that, oh, why don't we try this? That's how we created this problem. That's, I don't, others can sort of tell me, differently, but I honestly think a lot of the burden of this goes back to a marketing strategy and a liberalization, intentional liberalization in the prescribing of these drugs, with the idea that they were not as dangerous as we thought.
Thank you.
Well, I guess it begs the question, where are the doctors and their organizations regarding this? Why aren't they forefront?
I think they're caught in the middle. I think there are certainly people who are coming, around to the fact that we need to turn off the prescribing. But if your reimbursement is tied to patient satisfaction and you're prescribing for your patient and been told over a period of time that pain is a fifth vital sign, we have to eradicate pain, and long-term treatment with opiate medications for chronic pain conditions is relatively safe, this is a whole generation that needs re-education that isn't true. But you're dead on right. We write too many pain prescriptions, period. And it isn't an acceptable alternative to say, I'll give you 100 pain medication, but why don't you only use 10 of them and then keep the other ones on the shelf? That just lines somebody's pockets with a big profit. And, it isn't necessary. It's not an acceptable means of treatment. I don't treat living people anymore, as you know, but I can't help but think, and I'm out of the loop of medical education in this regard, but I can't help but think that we're really overdue for a big rethinking of pain treatment in this country.
I had a back surgery and they sent me home against my will because I have a real addictive personality, and I told the doctor that, and he's like, well, take them anyhow, you don't want them, flush them. And that's what happened. So.
Right, but if somebody leaves those in the medicine cabinet, teenagers, oh, what's in mom and dad's medicine cabinet? That's not, a hypothetical situation. That's been, supported by studies that the access frequently starts in the home, or somebody's home and people bringing that and sharing it with friends.
Simon.
Just as a side note, when the doctors say just toss it, these drugs wind up in their water system. People flush them down the toilet, they get into the water.
A lot of
and then
intoxicated turtles.
Yeah, and then people eat the fish. So, I mean, that's even irresponsible, beyond the human tragedy.
So what, Dr. Gilson, what is being done? I know we have 4 major hospitals or 3 here. Are these CEOs on the board on these kind of task force to really hear and implement what their doctors are doing? Because what Councilman Gallagher stated is true. You know, some of the nurses and the doctors have the mindset, I just want to take away this patient's pain, and they don't care about getting them addicted to some of these things.
We've reached out to the state medical board. Guidelines have been written about, maximum daily dosing with opiates relative to these morphine equivalents, how many of these is realistic, and that you would need to be justifying ongoing therapy. I don't know those efforts as well as maybe Vince could speak to some of that, but I think the medical community is responding. I don't know, if we could go faster. I'm sure, I would love to see it go faster, but I think some responses are being made. You could maybe flesh out some details.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Your name? My name is Vince Caraffi. I work for the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, but I chair the Opiate Task Force. A couple of the documents that you have in front of you, and we'll get to Dr. Gilson's question. You had asked about what's going on with the fentanyl. In October, the CDC was actually up here. They had a strike team that came up. They were focused on interviewing stakeholders, but also individuals that were dealing with the illness in 4 counties in Ohio. So one of the documents that you have in front of you is a summary report that would link you to the full report on what their thoughts are to put prevention in place, how we should maybe increase services oriented to those individuals, busting stigma that's actually associated with this illness, very similar to mental health. The other document that you have in front of you, the colored document, is our annual report for the Cuyahoga County Opiate Task Force. Since we've been involved in this and we've seen that transition where pain has become the 5th vital sign, we originally started out focusing on guidelines for emergency rooms from the standpoint of prescribing practices. Just recently, as of last week, the CDC actually put together a prescribing guideline for primary care physicians. So one of the things that we're really working on across the state is trying to really reinforce prescribing guidelines, understanding that there are people with legitimate pain per se, but we've kind of shifted that needle way over here, and that's based on the 5th vital sign. Some of the challenges that we have faced, I know that the Department of Justice and Metro Hospital have tried to focus on changing those HCAP scores going back. Much resistance. We didn't get anywhere with that. So part of our actual work through the State Health Department is working through the G-Code, which is the government or the governor's opiate action team, to try to really reinforce better prescribing guidelines, getting physicians more education on addiction as a whole. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the things that you had mentioned that's really down into the weeds are judges and I think our lawyers get more training on addiction medicine than physicians. And I think that, you had mentioned some things as far as guidelines. I think we're unfortunately a country that we have a pill mentality for everything. We want our Lipitor's, we're going to McDonald's to get our Biggie fries and our Diet Coke. So it's a cultural shift that we're working on. Those things are in place. I myself would love to see these numbers reduced. I have children. I live in Olmsted Falls and they're in high school. Heroin is everywhere, unfortunately, and so is fentanyl. And I think the one thing that Dr. Gilson, when we talk about the fentanyl, we're hearing stories now that people are selling fentanyl as opiate pain medication. So there's a misconception what people are getting on the street might be opioids, but they're taking and ingesting something that's 30 to 40 times higher. There is a lot of good success and a lot of good partnerships going on, whether it's our drug court, whether it's the work for the Adams Board, whether it's having the great localized data that we can share with the CDC so that they can come back and give us recommendations. It's just unfortunate that I think stigma really plays a huge role in this disease and this illness, and people are fearful of really saying that their loved one is a heroin addict. Where do they go when the resources aren't available for treatment? And, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gilson, I think in many cases, we're seeing more people in need for opioid treatment than alcoholism. And when Michael Botticelli, who is the policy director for the White House, says it was easier for him to come out as a homosexual male than tell somebody he was an alcoholic, that tells you how strong the stigma of this illness is. And I think from a medical standpoint, we want to see this disease treated in parity with a lot of other chronic diseases that have similar relapse rates. You know, but when individuals present and they say that they're a heroin addict or they're there because they have an abscess, the treatment's a little different. So hopefully I didn't mean to ramble on, but just to answer some of your questions, there is some good work going on in Cuyahoga County. Our resources, our leadership, it's just we'd really like to see some changes, and I think that's going to take some time and thinking maybe a little differently, and opening up treatment would be great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Doctor, we have 20 minutes left, so if we could, you want to parcel that out as you see fit?
Sure. I certainly want Bill Denahan to talk some. I think treatment works. You know, I don't see a lot of people dying in their 60s and 70s from the chronic effects of drug abuse. We certainly see our share of people dying in that age group from acute overdose. But if we take the analogy that we're losing 200 or so, 240 people a year out of 20,000, what's happening to that other 19,500? They have to be getting better. And that's why I think, you know, it was important for Mr. Denahan to be here, because that treatment piece is a big part of the fixing of the problem right now. The education piece is, we won't fix the problem overnight with education, but we can't ignore it. I think that that's critical. But for the more immediate addressing of the problem, I'd say treatment is the biggest issue we should talk about. I'll yield the floor to Bill.
Thank you, Dr. Gilson. Mr. Chairman, members of the Safety Committee, Bill Denahan from the Adam Board. First, I want to reassure you that treatment does work and people do recover. But what we're going through in this current wave of the epidemic is really caused the greatest concern for lack of capacity. Lack of capacity for beds, lack of capacity for folks getting in to detox. And we made some changes this year to deal with the former wave that we had, and we had some successes, but I've got to tell you that the way it's going now, the tremendous increases from year to year of folks that are overdosing is extraordinary. If you took all the figures that Dr. Gleason gave you and then added on the figures of the DAWN program each year, you would see how many people overdosed and made the decision. And it's about 100 to 125 people more each year for the last 3 years. That tells me we're not winning. We're losing this whole process, and that we've got to do things differently. And one of the things that we've got to do is address the lack of capacity, and that is our bed days. The other thing is that we're not the only ones in the country looking at it this way. People are looking at things differently. For example, in Seattle, they have police officers going into the drug zones and acting more like social workers, where they pull the person over, give them clean needles, and take their names and begin to take all the information and offer to take them to treatment. Then they go back in the same area the next week and find the individual and do the same thing over again. Next week they do the same thing. And eventually they get the person into treatment. And what they found that works. In Holland, they're starting to use heroin as a medicine by administering it in small doses that's controlled, so that the person comes down, something like methanol. We're facing a horrendous situation where I don't see us winning. And I've got to tell you that I went to the drug court graduation a couple weeks ago, and it was the most inspiring thing that I've seen to what we do. And I would recommend that all of you do it from time to time. You need that to build up your spirits that this is the right thing to do. Seeing the judges introduce the candidates, and then the candidates then speaking individually. So that was very, very good. Then I saw one of the judges Monday, and she shared with me that one of the graduates overdosed that Friday night and died. So we know that if somebody has a long lapse of these drugs and then starts using it again at the same level, that they're going to die. And you spoke earlier about advertising. I think we have to do every type of advertising, from social media to civic clubs to the meetings that are starting to happen by those in the recovery movement. There are young people that are in recovery that are now going out to schools and talking to their peers about what they went through in terms of heroin and how many friends that they've lost. So I think that the traditional way we've done things, we've got to figure out new ways to make it work, because quite frankly, I don't see it working the way it has. And my fear is that we won't get a grab on the capacity, and we'll still be saying to people, come back in 2 weeks or come back in a month. To say to somebody that's come in on their own at a detox that they have to come back is a death sentence, period. And we thought we resolved that, but this new wave has really, quite frankly, taken us by storm, and we're fighting everything, doing everything we can to deal with just having the bed days. And things have changed, you know. The needle is not that predominant anymore. The use of the pill or the capsule, they have figured out how to market this so that it's very cheap, it's very accessible, and it's very usable. So I think that we got to be smarter than them and start doing things differently. And I'm not standing here to suggest to you that I have all the answers. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting to you that I'm a public official telling you that we're in deep trouble, and that we don't have all the tools we need necessary. For example, we have a tool where if we could lift the restriction on the use of beds for alcohol and drug, and get Medicaid reimbursement, called the IMD exclusion, more of the providers that have space can open up their beds. But when President Kennedy passed the omnibus mental health law in 1961, Congress in 1963 passed an exclusion to prevent the building of institutions with the 16-day exclusion on the reimbursement of Medicaid. That was kicked over to the alcohol and drug field. And we know that there are some states that have pilot programs in which they removed the exclusion and allowed more beds to be used. Now, why is that important? Well, we have providers here in this community that could open up beds. A new behavioral health hospital called Highland Springs out off of Harvard has a wing for, I think, about 32 or 42 beds available. If we open that up, that would be immediate for Medicaid exclusion. So Congresswoman Marsha Fudge had a press conference about a year ago in our office to promote that. What has to happen is that the state of Ohio has to request it. Yesterday morning, Judge Moore of the prison system was in our office for a meeting, and he is signing on, and a person representing Director Polk said that she supports it. Our hope is that the message gets to Columbus to have them support our federal government to remove the exclusion IMD. That's just one type of thing. That would open up providers that have space for bed days to open up for bed days. So there's a whole number of things, as Vince and Dr. Gilson has said, that are going on. It's like a whole number of balls on the air, and they're still floating and waiting for them to come down and realize how that could be of service to us. The other thing that I want to mention to you, there is some changes in who's coming in. The youth are getting younger, but the biggest change is women. Women were a very small figure in the beginning, but they're now getting close to 40 to 50%. That is huge. And from our providers now, I mentioned that there are more women being treated for this than men. And that's it. And that's a sign that is really going on. When you're treating women, then generally children are engaged and involved. So it's complicated, that whole process a great deal. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you. It's been very informative. I know I know you're beaten down, but it's not over till it's over, you know?
No, it's not over till it's over, and we'll continue doing the job that we need to do. And again, I'm reminded that treatment works, people do recover. It's getting them to the treatment on a timely basis.
And
That's the key.
It just seems odd that at the doctor level, at the MD level, it seems like there could be a major change there, and I'm just wondering why that's so difficult.
Well, it's really significant, I think, that the Center for Disease Control put out that notice to tell doctors to back off and not give the 50 prescription of oxycodones, to give 2 or 3 or enough to hold them over, and if they need more, they could come back. That's not an order. That's a notification that this helps the system. And I think that's the beginning of this process that hopefully will not take a whole lot of time for it to sink in that it's got to change.
Thank you. Mr. Germana?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Danahan, the numbers that we're turning away that can't be served, can you just quantify that in comparison to how many people are dying? How many people are we turning away? I mean, because I have no idea how big that problem is.
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Germana, I don't know that number, but what I do know is that, and I think Dr. Gilson alluded to this, that we were averaging around 200 fatalities a year. The numbers that have been reported this last weekend, we're looking in doubling that. And I think that's doubling that. Or if we're doubling that, that answers the question of those numbers that were turned away. I know in the circles of halfway houses that I travel, that they are picked up by other people that are in recovery and try to hold them off for the period of time until they get back in, but always doesn't work.
Sorry, excuse me. Councilman Germain, I can actually answer that question. Through the Ohio Department of Health, we call reportable Class A diseases. We also have threshold data for instances of overdose. And once we cross that threshold, we're able to tease out some information. You know, poor data coming in is poor data coming out, but we're able to query just heroin and opioids. And I think this was in December of last year. We had 129 individuals that presented in our emergency departments here. And I think 62% of those individuals were discharged home just because we don't have the spaces available. We're looking to actually do a better job. Sometimes when you get into data collection, if somebody spells heroin wrong, or if it just says overdose. So it's probably underreported. That's one of the things that we're working on internally in our office, working with our service area of epidemiology and surveillance, because I think that adds more to what Bill is talking about, the need for more resources. You know, you have to have people in treatment. The stories that we hear where family members are giving their children money to buy Suboxone on the street because they can't get into a treatment center and they're trying to control their withdrawals. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and really opening up treatment, I think, is fantastic, but at the same time, doing more for prevention, I think, is instrumental in this, in combating this illness. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. Very informative. Other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you.